roll call. Oh, with Jim? Actually, just say your name for the...
Okay. Jim Nickel, here.
Congressman, late.
Oh, you're not actually.
John Thomas here.
John Goggin.
Steve Bahan.
Mike Chow.
Ken Allers.
And excused absences, Heidi Youngworth. I have a motion to approve the minutes of the June 15th meeting.
Moved.
A second.
Any modifications to the minutes? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Public comment. There's no public.
Steve's here. Cindy and Steve Johnson. Pass out today.
Okay.
What are these?
I don't know. I guess they're to do with Turtle Watch. What they do.
One, Mr. Allers.
Did not.
The county sheriff's here. Captain Layler, would you like to give us a monthly update on trends? Any issues going on the island we need to know about?
I don't know this month that we've had a bunch of
Identify
anything
yourself.
as far as, I'm sorry?
Identify
Oh,
yourself.
sorry, Captain Tim Layler, Lee County Sheriff's Office. As far as trends, we don't have any specific trends. We've had some sporadic things throughout the island. Had a couple of bicycle thefts again, but we have good suspects in that, and we actually just the other night in relation to something else, but we think they're going to be involved in the bicycle. That's pretty much as far as the way of trends for the month.
Well, congratulations to you and your team on the 4th of July. That was an extremely smooth operation that day. I
was
heard
very
nothing
successful.
but compliments.
Appreciate that. We were definitely in full force down here and operation with no real problems. So,
Anybody have any questions for the captain? I'm going to ask you to step back later as we go through the survey and talk about community policing, if you don't mind, if you could stick around. All right, status of the Code Blue quotes.
Randy, Niagara Administrative Officer. Right now, we're looking at different options to present to you guys alternative products as well. Code Blue hasn't reached out any requests that I've told them about, so they're contacting me to their local vendors. But as I said, there's 2 other options that we're looking into. The range typically from depending on the material that you want, from 7,000 to 11,000. That's turnkey and non-turnkey projects.
This would be alternative vendor, meaning competitors to
Competitors,
Code.
yes.
Yeah.
So people like Takaphone and Lumka.
Do a very similar program, or are they just providing parts?
Essentially the same thing. So the strobe lights, connecting you to an emergency line, stuff like that.
Thank you.
Haven't had much success with Code Blue, so we're looking at alternatives.
Okay. Any other questions on the Code Blue? MPO, Tom, there been any meetings? Anything that's going on at the county level?
Nothing that involves us. I'm very interested to know the progress of the permitting for the new Big Carlos Pass Bridge. All I've gotten is get back to you on that sort of thing. Could imagine.
Yeah, is there a start date for that? Estimated start date for the Big Carlos Bridge?
I'm not privy to one.
The last I heard, they were batting around completion of the Estero Boulevard project run around Estrelita. So when that was done, then they'll have another reason to slow traffic on South Fort Myers Beach. But I think that the run up the bridge, they want to be complete, the Estero Boulevard project. Who knows when that'll be?
Because I think the interest for our committee would be, how are they gonna redirect traffic? What's the congestion gonna be? Is there anything we can do to help mitigate that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Exactly,
So,
exactly.
okay. Sidewalk markings and bike signage. Just kind of remind everybody what this is. The previous council back in 2017, I think it was, maybe it's 2018, approved painting markings on the sidewalk indicating bikes, indicating walkers. And since then, we've been waiting for an interlocal with the county, an agreement as to ability to put the paint markings down, and then actually who's going to pay for those paint markings. They would be from roughly Red Coconut to Times Square, where the sidewalk is shared. So any update on that?
Nothing on my end.
Who actually is responsible for getting that interlocal assigned? Is that the council or is that the town manager?
Well, wish I could give you an answer. I don't know the honest answer to that, to be completely honest. I have been talking with Roger about it, and I know there's been communications with the county about it. But as far as where exactly it is, it's kind of in a they want to wait and see kind of mode.
They want to wait and see, be in the county or the town?
Yeah, I mean, we can't obviously do anything until the county tells us we can. So all we can do is keep asking, and similar to MPO, we haven't gotten a definitive date, as far as I know.
What are they waiting
when
and
or if we
seeing
can do it.
of? What are they waiting for? Waiting and seeing?
Well, I can't speak of the sidewalk, but I can talk about the bicycle markings on the street. You know, we did do them on our portion of Estero on the north end of the island. I have had conversations with Commissioner Sandelli about doing the south end. They're monitoring the use of the north end to see how they wear is kind of the last thing I've been told. So I plan on following up in the next week or so to see if there's been any movement, at least on that part of it. And I'll make sure I ask about the potential interlocal, and I'll reach out. I have a meeting with Roger tomorrow. I will talk to him about that as well.
So our next meeting in August, then, either from you or through Chelsea, if we can get an update on just where that stands. On both. I mean, they've both been sitting for a while, so. And the survey showed that several people were concerned about bike traffic and pedestrian traffic on the sidewalks. That was a big issue for people, so that was one way to start dealing with it. And so I think it's one we should kind of make sure we get a priority on. The bicycle bells, I'm assuming, since we have these on our plate here, our dais, that the bells have arrived. Right. Do we know the current inventory, how many of those lights are left? I know they were selling those approximately.
I believe 100 of them were given to the school.
I think prior to that, we sold maybe 20, 25. So I think we had, maybe 20 left, maybe less.
But I will tell you that on the add-on list for next year, at the request of this committee, you did request funding for to restock that inventory.
So I'm going to ask the committee itself then, when we give the report in August, we had talked about having, and I've actually talked to the captain and lieutenant about this a little briefly as well, having a bike safety day, which we give away 100 bells, lights, and then a document that describes the state law, the town ordinances, and bike etiquette, so that we have at least 100 bikes on the island that are in compliance with the laws and the ordinances and an understanding of those laws and ordinances. So I'll ask the committee's opinion on me once again approaching the council, indicating we need to purchase at least 100 devices for that purpose, and if they approve it, we'll come back and figure out how to coordinate with the sheriff and the fire department to have that bike safety day to get this awareness out there. What are your thoughts?
I like that. I like the first 100 free. Then why don't we order more and sell them? And all the rental people send out some kind of notification saying, bring your bikes down for your rental units, and it's at cost or whatever, and recoup the cost. At least as many out as we possibly can, not giving them away, all of them away.
going to ask you to table the rental thing, because that's coming up under the survey thing about what the council wants to do with resorts and rental companies, and whether we can mandate that they actually put on the lights and that, and if they do, then we may talk about purchasing for them, quantity purchasing to help them out, but
John,
I agree with that.
you intending to have the Bike Safety Day in conjunction with some other event in the August or September timeframe, or will you do it independently up in Times Square, or just pick a Saturday or whatever and do it, or?
I haven't any concept on that yet. The idea was, do we want to ask for X number, and 100 may be the wrong number, we may want 200 that we want to acquire for giving away.
Right.
But to acquire a number, and if the council agrees that they will pay for that, then we would come back here, and we as a group would decide, along with the sheriff's department, what makes sense as far as a safety rodeo, when to give it, how to do it.
Right. Fire too could be there.
Because the other things, so much is coming together. We're going to be talking about community policing in a couple minutes. And so would community policing would that be part of it if the council actually votes for community policing? So I think there's things coming together as to how we would coordinate that event. Right now, I think we need to do is get into the budget that we need X dollars for X number of devices for the purpose of giving them away in a educational environment, such as a bike rodeo.
Right, because we can't do it without the devices, really.
Right, and we need them to get it in their budget, which you'll be talking about in August, September.
See, what was the cost of one of these? Per unit cost?
$50.
50?
How much is the light again? Sure.
It was $175.
Yes, exactly. That's why I'm telling them to. Right. So I'm hearing there's a consensus that we want to ask the council to fund the purchase of X number. What would be the appropriate number we ask if they're roughly $5 a
As a
packet?
committee, you guys have already requested, I believe it's like $2,500.
Okay.
And that's on, I've seen that on the draft add-on list.
Perfect.
So that's 500 units roughly.
And with the distribution, I'd like to add to this that it's a distribution of both the lights and the bells together, so that we sold lights before, but that missed the audible devices, which is equally important.
Right.
And that anybody who gets them for free must also receive a document that says, here are the state laws, here are the local ordinances, and here are bike etiquette, so that they at least read that or have that to read to know how to behave on their bikes when they're out there, which way to go when they're riding down the sidewalk or the road, how to move over, how to slow down, et cetera, things that would appear to be common sense to most people seem to be lacking when people are on vacation. All right, then I'll add that to the report for August.
John, if I may. Captain Lather, can you let me know, is there any differences between the town ordinances as far as bicycles that differ from state statute as far as what they can and can't do? I just am curious or worried that maybe we could confuse some people. Our ordinances may be more strict than some of the state statutes.
Tim Layler, the County Sheriff's Office. That would be something that we'd probably need to see if there are any differences. But I know one of the things we're just talking is the lights. I believe state statute requires one on the front and one on the back. Didn't know if that was something. Sorry. Okay.
We are purchasing both. The argument, and Tom can address this as well, because when we first talked about this 3-4 years ago, when the committee first got reformed, Tom met with every rental aid company on the island. And their argument was, we tell them they have to have back by sunset, and the law says they must be available or turned on between sunset and sunrise. And they were saying, since we make them come back before sunset, there's no need to put the lights on there. So one of the things, and I've got this later on in my notes here, is to have the town attorney actually research, is it the law that they have them on there, or is it the law that they only have to have them on there if they're going to utilize the bike between sundown and sunrise? And then if that's the case, then they can't rent them for 24 hours a day, which is what they do now. So
I was gonna say, I believe that some of them do rent them for several days at a time, which, you know, I'd imagine people are riding them after dark.
again, it was probably 4 years ago we first started talking about this, and Tom did go around and meet individually a couple times with each one, trying to get them into it. We had recommendation to go forward. We were going to be more forceful with them, and we were asked by the town's manager to not do that at that time. So it's been raised in the survey, so we'll resurrect it again.
I believe when I sat on the Public Safety Committee, that was also an issue where they wanted to hand out pamphlets that when they rented the bike, that there's.
We're told we're not here to run someone's business. All right, the public safety survey. So there's a lot in here. I tried to summarize in the handout that you have here. And I've made some notes on how to get through this in somewhat a timely manner this morning and prioritize. The objective really is to prioritize what we will address and when we'll address it. So there are certain things that affect the budget that the town council will be acting on within the next month or so, and those probably should be our priorities. And then there are other things that we have to wait on because of the timing of the street lighting, as well as the crosswalks and the construction, et cetera. But I'm just going to follow my notes so I don't lose track here. Community policing was one of the issues, and it's been raised by the town council and discussed there recently. So last month we agreed to discuss community policing as it relates to the issues raised in the survey and on Fort Myers Beach in particular. It should be noted the survey showed that 90% of the respondents felt safe on the island. So I think that's a positive note on the current level of service by the Lee County Sheriff overall has been effective in providing a degree of confidence in the safety for the residents and the visitors. So kudos to Captain Lawler and his team. However, 69% of the respondents indicated they would like to add community policing to the island. So for our recommendation to council, we need to kind of help define what that service would be and how it would be implemented. So we talked to Captain Lawler, and going to ask him to come forward and help us understand how community policing could address some of the higher level issues raised in the survey. I think our discussion, kind of discovery with the captain, needs to cover a few areas. One is how community policing would address the major issues raised in the survey, set the proper expectations for both the council and the community. In addition, we need to understand how the current core services response is prioritized, and community policing services will interact. So we know that the core services will not diminish, but how will the core service community policing interact to respond or to serve the community? The other, that's a big issue, is coverage, and that's the number of resources needed to provide the coverage as it relates to the issues raised. For example, if you go through the full survey, there are issues being raised from sunrise when people are trying to walk the beach, and they're complaining about the homeless people out there that are doing their morning, actually urinating or defecating as they're trying to walk the beach because they're just getting up. And they go right through issues throughout the day, right through till after sunset when the bar's closed and the rowdiness and the drunkenness are out there. And so that kind of coverage would take, I would believe, more than 2 resources. So I think we need to also get from the captain some idea of resources and how resources would be, what number of resources we would need on there. So if you don't mind coming back up there, you or Lieutenant, whichever, or together, and start with community police and some of the bigger issues, and certainly the number one behind public safety was the homeless and the homeless population. And here it's really what the sheriff can and cannot do regarding the homeless, as opposed to homeless universally, because we'll talk about that in a little bit. So does that make sense for you?
Yeah, sure. One of the things I'd like to touch on, though, is just the core level of service, because I think that was some confusion. The way it works is we have 2 zones that covers Fort Myers Beach. Those zones has 1 deputy. So I think the confusion, everybody thinks, oh, we only have 2 deputies on Fort Myers Beach. The way that works is there's a formula that we use to account for career development, mandatory training, work time, vacation, personal time, sick days, military leave. So these are all these things that we need to take into account to have 24-hour coverage 365 days a week in our zones. The way that's calculated is it's, I believe it's 1.3 deputies per shift per zone is the way that works out. So what it is to get 24-hour coverage in the 2 zones, it equates between 10 and 11 deputies is really what the core service is out to be. And in that core service, it also covers aviation unit, marine unit, SWAT team, our bomb squad, our dive team, our canine unit, forensics unit, crime scene technicians, all these other units that come along with the service that we provide. If there's a critical incident down here, we can have, as we've proved in the past, or as we've shown in the last couple of months, our response is going to be like that with whatever we need. And with that core level of service, we conduct traffic enforcement. We're enforcing Florida state statutes as well as county ordinances, responding to priority calls. And I'll get to prioritization of calls here in just a little bit. If there's an implementation of unit, the one thing I want to be clear is the core level of service does not go away. That stays in effect. Basically what it is, the community policing, contract deputies, community policing, what it is, it's an enhanced level of service. This program implemented, what it would do is it allow the deputies that are in that group, community policing guys will say, dive into these quality of life issues, spend the time on them, and try and find solutions to these quality of life issues, such as transient problem. We constantly get calls about it, the noise ordinance, bikes on the sidewalks and on the beach, traffic infractions, speeding, and that type of thing. Our core level deputies do that stuff already. However, it's in between their calls for service that they respond to. Some of the benefits of the community policing stuff would be getting the same deputies all the time. With that being said, you're going to see the same faces, the same 2 deputies. If you did 2 or the same 4, whatever that number may be, you're going to have the same faces. What that does is it allows them to build relationships with the business owners, with the members of the communities, the schools. These are the type of things where the community starts to build a relationship and they feel comfortable sharing information with these deputies. That sharing information so much easier to help solve problems before they even become a problem and attack or work on the issues at hand. Community policing deputies will still respond to priority calls as needed. If we get a critical incident and additional manpower and they're down here, obviously they're going to respond to that. Their primary focus is going to be to work on these quality of life issues, work with the community and build these relationships. The idea of this community policing project is not just to solve crime. It's to maintain good quality of life, working on these quality of life issues, the noise ordinance, the transients, all this stuff that, these are the items, I keep saying them because these are the items that we keep hearing about that people want a little more of a service or a little more of an interaction or a little more enforcement on. And when it comes to the transient issue, we get complaints or, people like, oh, we've got them sleeping on the beach, like Mr. Duggan mentioned. What we can do is, and what we already do, but we would have a little more time to dive into these things, not just the problem, but finding solutions. Whether it be housing for them, employment, have our hot team that I've already had down here, trying to give them resources and education with Pastor Sean and some of the churches and build these relationships and try and find out how we can get the community involved as well to help solve some of these issues. You know, when it comes to transients of the homeless population, we run into some that just don't want help and they're content being where they're at. Very hard, without a violation of law, to be able to enforce something like that. Again, through the communication and building these relationships, I worked down here for a very long time as a zone deputy. When I did, I was down here, 18, 19 years ago, it was a different time. The population's grown, everything's just multiplied. Our deputies learn who these folks are, and have some deputies that are here that can concentrate on these issues. Know who the homeless people are, know them by name, know what they do, know where they stay. Not only that, you do build a rapport with them, and it's a little bit easier to give somebody some help or give them some suggestions on maybe how to make some changes when they feel comfortable talking to you rather than a random deputy that shows up on the scene. These relationships they're just invaluable. As far as the prioritization of calls, the way our core level service responds to calls is these calls come in, they go through our dispatch center. Based on the content of the call, they're prioritized. So a crash with injuries on the south end is certainly going to be a priority call over a transient walking up and down Lynn Hall Park and just getting calls because he just came off the beach or slept on the beach. It's just, that's the way we do those things. Community policing project, if this is implemented, is not something that's going to be an immediate. You're not going to see results right away. It's not something that you're going to see numbers. What it's going to do is it's going to, like I said, try and attack these issues or deter these problems before they begin. Communication with the members of the community and the businesses is just a huge part of this. Just helps build that comfort level. I think, and that goes for all of us. I know when I feel comfortable talking to somebody, I see the same people. You meet with the same people, you just feel a little more comfortable having an open dialogue and speaking about things. You get a deputy that's a different face showing up. You're getting a business owner who dealt with another deputy 2 days ago on the other side of the shift or night shift. Now it's like you feel like you're building that rapport all over again. With a community policing deputy or an enhanced service, you're building that bridge. They're always accessible. The business members, and they're going to have their email. Obviously, they have time off and families like everybody else, but they're going to be dedicated to these causes and helping us solve these issues. I don't know if there's any specific questions anybody has as far as the program in general, or.
I've got some, but let's go down the road. Jim, any ideas, discussions, comments?
Specifically, they're going to interact obviously with businesses. Are they going to do like neighborhood watch? Are they going to be interacting with
also do neighborhood watch
community
programs, yes.
at that level?
What we would do is they would assist if there's a community that wanted to do a neighborhood watch. They would assist. We have a crime practitioner unit that assists with that. So the policing deputy would be the liaison for that to help get proper signage and attend the meetings, community meetings, that type.
In addition, would they be in a position to be responsive to individual neighborhood problems? In other words, that come to their attention, as opposed to a zone deputy. He's going to probably be spending most of his time out on Estero Boulevard, popping in and out of businesses, maybe checking some complexes, and responding to calls. And they may do some traffic enforcement if they come across violations, or even if they have a little free time to run some radar on the interstate highway we've put down the middle of Estero Boulevard. But I envision that a community policing officer might have an opportunity to address some neighborhood concerns that maybe they wouldn't have an opportunity to do.
Absolutely, and that is the basis. To dive deeper into thing. it's regular occurrence.
Right.
You know, you get a neighbor that's constantly violating the noise ordinance, it's, can dive deeper into because they're clear with it, work on these problems and find solutions of what that is.
Closely would they work with code enforcement officers? In other words, if they observe what's clearly code violations in a neighborhood area, or even if it was out in the main area, are they going to take the initiative then to interact with the town's
Yes.
code enforcement people to, if we can address some of those issues that might go unaddressed now?
Absolutely. We are not code enforcement officers.
Right, you're not going to,
We're dealing with some of these quality of life issues, and part of the solution involves code. There's certainly going to be a little communication there. And I know that when I was down here years ago, we worked very closely. That's absolutely something representative of the town and seeing her crew.
would these officers be available then if town government or town council had certain priorities that they thought should be addressed to tailor their activities, maybe address those specific issues? You know, it could be in a particular area we're having a lot of problems with bicycles on the sidewalk, or who knows what kind of craziness can occur here now and then. But that government or that town government or the town council could interact with.
Yes, they would. There would be interaction, but the direction that they're going would most likely go through me and the lieutenant. Go down a direct. There would certainly be a line of communication there,
Right.
But the ultimate where they're going to be and what program, you know, what's going to be prioritized is, we're certainly going to have a say in that.
There would be a chain of command that they would be following.
Absolutely.
So, because
Absolutely.
there is some risk, I would think, in my experience, when you have direct contact from, say, town government or town council, and they pick up the phone and say, I want you to go handle this problem or do this thing, and then that puts the deputy kind of in
A bad position.
a bad position,
I know what's a law enforcement issue, what's a code issue, or what's not a law enforcement issue.
right?
So, not only that, I'm very hands-on. I want to know what's going on. So, it would need to go through us and trickle down. There'd certainly be an open line of communication from the town and the CP deputies, absolutely. But as far as any direction, it would need to go through me and the lieutenant, and we would facilitate that.
And that's how we work now. If I get a complaint of speeding in the Shell Mound neighborhood, I reach out to the captain, provide some additional patrols in that area for your crews. So that's how we operate now.
That's great.
And the reason for that is, like I said, I want to know what's going on. I also want to make sure that it's getting handled so it's not a reoccurring problem.
Right. Very good.
Yeah, to be clear, these are not town resources, these are sheriff resources under the captain and lieutenant, and they follow their direction, they get assigned by them, and all the rest of it is with any other officer that you have. Their duties are just aligned differently than the core services.
Yes. And the scheduling and all that would be done through us. It's not, the town's not going to, wouldn't set their schedule. I mean, if there's priorities, obviously we're going to address to whatever those priorities are.
And the reason I say that is because there was discussion that's been kicked around both at the last council meeting as well as on local radio about how Bonita Springs has 14-plus officers. It's like their own police force. It's not really their own police force. It is the sheriff that has dedicated resources. The same thing would be applicable here.
Yes, there are sheriff's office employees that go through our chain of command, but they're dedicated to working on the issues in that location as they would be here.
Yes, one of my big, Tom Gressman, one of my big frustrations with this committee is that we spend a lot of time, mean well, the ordinances or the suggested ordinances that we bring up aren't enforced. And there's, the bicycle lights and bells is a really good example. We can spend a lot of time with that. What it comes down to is somebody actually pulling an electric bike off the sidewalk and telling the guy, look, you can't do this. And it's frustrating to me that we spend so much time on that and there is no enforcement. Jaywalking, things like that, the crosswalks. But I have a hard time believing that your guys are gonna do that. I think that they're going to be so conscious of traffic violations and more important things. I would be surprised if one of your guys is gonna go and pull over a little old lady on a sidewalk because she doesn't have a bike bell and a light.
Are we talking about the core level service, or are you talking about?
Well, both. Actually, I know the answer to the core level service guys, but I'm wondering about the CP guys.
Respectfully disagree.
Good.
I can't say that we don't enforce those things would be false. We absolutely enforce. These guys and girls are bumping in between calls for service and every other project and, you know, priority that comes up. So they always have the time to sit there and enforce bikes on the sidewalk when we've got a crash or a drunken disorderly or something else that we're dealing with on a busy weekend. No, they probably don't have that time then. Community policing deputies, if this is a priority and this is one of the issues that's coming through the town and through the council and through the members of the community, it's absolutely something we're. Now, I'm big on education as well. Get a family that's down here with their kids riding their e-bike on the sand out there to write them 4 tickets because they're out there and they don't know is probably not. I mean, we've got to warn and educate too. So yes, we absolutely will enforce those things as we do now, but they'll primarily be able to focus on these different issues.
I think I had the opportunity to meet with both the captain and lieutenant, and as we were going through, we talked about e-bikes and bikes in general as we were going through the survey. And one of the illustrations they gave of what community policing could do that CORE doesn't necessarily have the time for is to set up an occasional, I use the term roadblock, but that's not the term.
Operations. We regularly do traffic operations and crosswalk operations as we're able to. Again, this would free up the time to be able to do these operations more frequently.
They could actually set something up in an area and people going by without proper lighting or bells or e-bikes and that, they would have an operation that dealt with that for, I don't know, a couple hours a day during a certain time period. Either educate or those that are chronic violators, whatever penalties are allowed under the statute. That would be something that this resource would have the capability of doing more so than the core services. We'd be able to dedicate something to it.
If I could, here would be, I recently received a concern about the speed for Big Carlos Pass from the bridge attendant. I spoke with him just the other day. Absolutely. I got with the captain of South District because our district kind of separation line is there right in the middle. So we are working together on that to conduct traffic enforcement.
Separation line is in the middle of a pass?
Yes.
Okay.
So, however, for our deputies that work down here regularly, the core level service deputies, I put them all down there doing a traffic operation. They're in the middle of doing traffic enforcement. Now you got to call all the way up here in the square. Now we're automatically pulling off of that. There it allows deputies that are assigned to a unit that aren't responding to these priority calls as they're going to have the time to go and attack a problem like that where they're not getting called off every 5 minutes. That's in a nutshell, that really is the difference. It's allowing them the time to really look into these issues and work on them more intensively than they can when they're starting it, and 5 minutes later they're getting called out to a car parked in the handicap spot up here, or a domestic at one of the hotels or something. In that case, it becomes an officer safety factor. We're pulling all of our units off to respond to these things. So
I think that's an important part that you just mentioned that doesn't get discussed enough, is that the core level of officers have to respond to things, as you said, are prioritized based on your dispatches to what's more important. Whereas the community police officers or enhanced service officers aren't necessarily having to leave the base of the bridge to go deal with what could be a car accident. You have the core level service people that are going to go do that, but the enhanced service people can focus more of their time on the issues that we're discussing here today. Now, that being said, I'm assuming if there was something major that happened that they would have to respond, you would pull them to do that, but it would free up the core level officers to do what they need to do. It would free up the enhanced service officers or the community police officers to deal with the things that you're talking about, Tom. And I think that doesn't get discussed enough. I think people forget. They think that just because there could be 2 or 4 or 6 or 8 or however many community police officers we could or could not end up with, that when a call comes, all 4 or all 6 or all 8 are going to go Deal with the fender bender up at Times Square, and that's not the case.
Not the case. Major incident, we need the manpower, then it would.
I like your point about education. It's my impression, opinion, one of the problems we have is that we have so many very short-term visitors. The family of four that's here for a long weekend. I don't think that residents are probably your chronic problem. I think it's family of four who doesn't know that they can't ride the e-bike on the beach, or isn't aware, and we aren't doing a good enough job of educating them. We as a town, I think it's a big issue.
A thought process on that. So we're going to ruin their vacation and cost them money?
Of course, absolutely not.
Like,
just let them know. Yes. I absolutely don't want you to ticket them. Absolutely.
And I've always been real big on the education. I mean, people sometimes just don't know. The laws are different, the ordinances are different, and educate them. You go about it the right way, they're usually very appreciative, and you're not going to have a problem with them again.
I just want to, Tom also mentioned jaywalking, and this has come up several times, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is jaywalking that we think of, I'll say as a northerner, think of someone not using the crosswalk as jaywalking. The laws in Florida, that is not a violation. The violation is if you don't cross at a 90-degree angle from the sidewalk or where you're leaving, which is, go ahead and try and enforce that, but there is no law against them crossing 10 feet below the crosswalk that we put in place. Is that?
Yes.
So, again, it goes to your point of education, Tom, that people complain about that all the time, is that's the reason the traffic's bad, but we can blame the sheriff, but there's nothing the sheriff can do. If someone decides to cross 5 feet down from an existing sidewalk and they're going across at 90 degrees, they're legally within their right to do that. So I think that goes to education and, the value of crossing a crosswalk, the safety of that, because people are more observant in a sidewalk than just stepping out. But legally, there's an example where there's legally nothing the sheriff can do about that. On the other hand, will be the community policing and explain to them the value of a crosswalk versus stepping out in the middle of traffic.
Well, we don't always get the time to explain or complain. If somebody calls in about this, say, hey, look, this isn't a violation. It's really, Florida state statute says this. Because you go on something like this and 2 seconds later responding to another call, especially on a busy weekend. We see the traffic down here in season, and I have to say, and I think I'd be wrong if it isn't, we have a phenomenal district and a great team. I stand by what we do here. Our core level service does a phenomenal job. This beach is absolutely safe. Are there occasional issues or instances that pop up? Absolutely, we're going to get that anywhere. But as far as safety, this beach is very safe. I was down here again with my family just the other night, dining and walking through the square, and I do it frequently. I have family members that work on this beach. They're up and down here all the time, so I truly care about what goes on here. I'm not just a guy running a district. I'm fully invested in this district. I need you all to know that as well. I'm not just a guy sitting up there at the desk pushing paper and working these things. I truly care. My career has been, 90% of it has been involved in this beach. I'm very passionate about what goes on here. So I think that this program, I'm not a salesman. I'm not trying to sell this to anybody. Does it work? Yeah, I think it does. I know it does. It works in Bonita. It'll work here. Totally different population, totally different circumstances. The premise is the same. I do believe it'll work. I think 2 is that we're going to get the results out of 2 that everybody thinks they may get instantly, or be able to measure that success by numbers in a few months. I think that that's probably not going to happen. Because as we discussed with vacations and that formula, I've got 2. Hope I didn't jump ahead. If I've got 2 working down here, if that's the pilot program was to discuss 2, have days off. Mandatory court appearances. They're going to have mandatory training. They're going to have career development training. They're going to have personal days, vacation days, sick days, and all these things pull away from that, where when that happens, you don't put another person in that place for that comes with it. So just as it does with the core level of service.
Fun?
I just have a quick question. I'm all for community policing, but since that little welcome center, I think that's going to be leveled, do we have to budget, or do we need to budget, I should say, for a hub? Thought about that, like a little office?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's in the works. Our crew unit is working with Pastor Sean down at the church, and they're with the town as well, Councilman Ehlers and some others about a place up here.
That's why I wondered if they were gonna do that.
That's a great concept, and it really worked well.
I think it's wonderful. Plus it gives people a place to go, a point that you could say, go check out over there, go learn over there.
You know, I can tell you, it is in the works. It's kind of in that, crossing the T on the lease part of it right now. So the legal people are dealing with that, but it is in the works, and it hasn't been forgotten. And as he said, the community response unit has been working with Pastor Sean, and so it's coming. It's just a matter of formality right now, getting everything finalized.
And very much with the community policing, just like those outreach centers, that humanizes us. I go walk down the street and everybody, or you walk in a restaurant, people see us and immediately people are like, oh, what are they doing here? Or if you walk in these outreach centers and you're welcomed and we're giving you information, like it just changes your interaction. That's so important. So.
Have anything?
You know, I can see this being a problem, because I worked for Florida Power and Light for a lot of years, and I've had to interact with the public. So, I mean, I can see it being a problem, but like Jim, he was a policeman. Tom, he's out in the public. Florida Power and Light's with it too. I mean, I can just see, I don't know what the training is or but anyway, it can be, I can see it being a problem, because I pulled up on a job and had irate customers, and you got to try to calm them down, and time you leave, there's some foreman that can be, they can just piss them off, or you can pat them down.
This would be people that are selected for this spot. We're not just going to plug and play anybody in. It's got to be the right fit. And we do that with our manpower as it is. You maximize what you have to where you need to put them. You allocate the best fit where their strengths are, and we do that now. And we would do that with the community. I'm not going to just put anybody down here. It's got to be the right fit.
Ken?
Just the only thing I caution, and I hear it, and I've been hearing a lot, is people use the word pilot program. And when you hear something that someone says pilot, you almost are expecting certain results from it when you use words like that. As I'm sure Jim can testify to, being a former police officer, it's not always numbers that you have to look at, it's the things that you don't see. And to give you an example, talking about the e-bikes on the sidewalk, probably 2 or 3 times this year, sitting in traffic and you see them go by, it's having the officers in the right place. So I've seen twice this year already that officers have caught people riding their e-bikes down because they were in a position to see it. Now, if they were down at the base of the bridge and they get a call from myself or someone else saying there's an e-bike going down the sidewalk, by the time they get there, they're already gone. So just having the sheer numbers of people, I think, will make a difference. I think many of you noticed, and I got a lot of calls from people, as John said, about the 4th of July. It wasn't that we saw you arresting people or that we saw you, educating people, if you want to use that, but it's just the fact that you were there. I think the presence of having the Lee County Sheriff's Office around in the numbers makes a big difference. And that's not something that you're going to see in a data sheet that says, what you will notice is you'll start to see less people riding their bikes. As I've talked to other communities that have, Bonita being one, that have had the community police officers, it's not about that they see their arrest levels go way up. In fact, they actually go the other direction, because they are able to talk to them. They are able to educate them on some of the things that they can't do now because they don't have the resources to do it, in my opinion. And it's not the county's fault. It's not the town's fault. But I think I've been pretty vocal that I believe it's the town's fault. Or I think it's the town's responsibility, I should say, not fault, but to make sure that we give them the resources that they need to do what they need to do based on the stuff that we tell them that we want them to do. Riding the e-bikes on the sidewalks, loitering, drinking on the sidewalk, things like that they do now, but just having the sheer number of extra people there, I think you'll start to see that less and less happens. People don't like to do bad things when they know bad things can happen back to them. I think having enhanced officers or community police officers out there will make a difference, but you won't necessarily see it on a data sheet. And you gotta, I wanna see the numbers go down, not up. And I don't think that this, as Laler said, not out there to wreck someone's weekend. Out there to help them if they need help getting to places to get food, or they need help getting jobs. I mean, and just educating the businesses. I've had a lot of businesses that have wanted to reach out to the Lee County Sheriff's Office about what they can do to make their place safer, whether it's add cameras or add off-duty police officers in their own. And that's the thing, I think, where the community police officers will come in handy going forward. And we'll see where it goes. I mean, council is going to be discussing it coming up, and I'm optimistically hopeful, let's say.
I appreciate you bringing that up with the e-bikes, because, and that's what I was talking about. There is enforcement. You just may not see it in between, and that's what happens. But that then becomes a perception. Well, they don't do anything, or they can't do anything with that, and not always true. So, force these things. Don't have the time sometimes in between calls when they prioritize over an e-bike on a sidewalk. Of course.
And if I could ask, so you have right now, there are 2 zones on the beach, and you like to have 1.3 deputies per shift per zone, is that what I understood? Yeah. So what would your recommendation be as community policing? How many would you increase that to?
I personally believe that 2 is not enough, but I don't want to disappear like we're trying to sell a package, because that's not the case. I just need everybody to know that concerns about transients on the beach at 6 o'clock in the morning when you're walking, and then there's others who have concerns about people that are intoxicated or late at night after the square or on Old San Carlos or in some of the highly populated areas. It's a big time frame for 2 guys that are still going to have days off, personal time, sick time, all these things. So we got to take that into consideration, that you're not going to get 24/7 coverage with the CP guys. With you, it's just not going to happen.
What would your recommendation be, in your opinion?
I don't want to give a recommendation on what the town should do. That's going to be financially correct for them and what they feel their needs are. But I personally don't think that 2 is enough. Make that program work with 2 is going to work with, we work better when we're together on these operations. So the big part of this is information sharing. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. We would do an overlap, most likely an overlap shift. We would probably go on 10-hour shifts, 10.5-hour shifts, as opposed to our guys that are on 12-hour shifts now, where we would get 4 days out of each and have them overlap for 3. Some of these projects need more than one person to effectively work on. For example, traffic enforcement, bike enforcement, you got one person calling them out. Stop somewhere and you're seeing them on foot. By the time you see it, they're down there. You need somebody up ahead, or this type of operations. So that's where the number of deputies would come into play, provided the cost for that. 112, 600 or something like that per deputy per year, all inclusive. Or equipment, uniform, the whole deal.
112, 600?
I believe, I don't have the actual, I think it was 112, 644 or something like that, somewhere in that.
What are some of those costs, like the vehicle, the computers, that sort of thing? That's like a
It's
one-time
all
cost.
inclusive. That's
Right.
medical, retirement, vehicle, equipment, everything that we have. It's able to put a number on it. Oh, I don't know. That's above me, and we have
Well, I'm sure we would get a breakdown on that when it.
I don't think it's a breakdown. I think it's a total cost. That's what it is.
It's also all the resources too, like the helicopters, the specialty crime unit. It's not just the deputy in the car. As I think Jim has mentioned several times, the cost of an actual police department is very, very expensive. But so cost per deputy, although it may sound like a lot, when you actually break it down, it's not all that much money.
I'm all for community policing. I just wanted to go off of what you were saying, maybe something that we can look at as far as how many deputies, additional deputies and things like that. And I forget his name right off the top of my head, but there was a council member that was recently interviewed on Beach Talk Radio by Ryan from Bonita, and they have Jesse. They have community policing down there. So one of the things that Jesse offered was that we get together with him or the council to look at how they implemented community policing, because they started out with a certain number of deputies, additional deputies, and then they liked the results so much that they increased that. And I want to say, correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, wasn't it like they have 12
I think
now?
they're about 16 right now.
16?
But population's different, and
And I understand all of that, but it's like we could at least use them as model to go off of how they implemented, you know, and how they went about it, because they didn't start off with community policing, correct? I mean, they added that on.
yes, they added it about
Right.
20 years ago.
Just for information purposes, Dan and Roger have met with Jesse and Captain Lee from, who handles whatever district that is.
He was there at the
He's in.
implementation.
Dan has already talked to them, and along with Jesse, and gone through that, as well as Roger. Jim has met with Bonita Springs as well. But as the captain's saying, one of the issues is that we are a much different size, and we're much more of a resort community, so there are some different issues. The, what I think the objective of the committee should be is to structure the report that we give in August that shapes the issues around what community policing is, but also shapes what you get or what you don't get, depending on what you pay for. Now, I'll explain that, but those are two things I want to talk about. The first one is, I heard from the committee as well as your responses that words rapport, relationship, education, and you mentioned businesses. But in conversations both with Bonita Springs and with yourselves before, a lot of this is that interaction is the key to this thing. It's the interaction that these community policing officers will have to meet with local businesses and be able to help them how to identify, you know, when is a crowd getting out of hand, when is an individual, when should they call the police, how should they contact the police. The same with individual residents. What do you do when you encounter a homeless person or someone that's a panhandler that's beginning to annoy you or to harass you? A lot of, and correct me this because I'm trying to shape in this report in my head right now, a lot of what we're going to get with community policing is this interaction with these officers and individuals and businesses in the community on how to deal with some of the problems that are arising that we see right now, so that they can't be everywhere. I don't care if you get a dozen, they're still not going to be everywhere. People still need to know how to deal with the situation and then how to and when to contact the police to come in and provide the policing services. So that's, and when I say this, I'm shaping this report in my head, so I want some pushback on this. That to me is what the community policing is really the primary objective, is to build that rapport, so that when we talk about a transient person, if you have a transient person and they know who that person is, as the captain said, they know where they normally are, but when they're doing something they're not supposed to, them going up and approaching them is going to have a different relationship than a complete stranger coming up and how they deal with them, because they understand the personality of that transient that's decided, whether it's someone who has mental issues or someone who just chooses that way of life. They know that, and so they're going to be able to respond to that individually different than a core services person who may see that person once a month, if that. So I think some of the keys are, it's that building these relationships to educate the public and the businesses on how to interact, how to deal with some of these problems, and then when to and how to call on the sheriff resources as applicable. So that's kind of the theme on that thing. The next piece of this is, and you've watched the town council meetings, there is definitely a split there as to how they want to fund this and what they want to fund. And I know too has been kicked around, and one thing Jesse and made pretty clear is 2 is not the right number. 2 is very limited as what you can do, and that's why they grew to 16. Also, as Dan mentioned, calling it a pilot seems to put, anybody who's been in business, which a lot of these members of the council have been, they think of a pilot as having a metrics. Okay, we're going to see a 12% decrease in this particular crime, or we're going to see, a 15% increase in this. And it's, as the captain's pointed out, this is relationship building, and it's education, and it's that interaction with the community, and how safer the community feels, and how more adequately they can respond to situations that arise. I think what we need to kind of lay out in the report is that council has to choose between the number of issues and the coverage that they want covered. I think redundant there, but the number of issues, do they want them to focus on ordinances? Do they want them to focus on homeless? Do they want them to focus on, neighborhood watches? Whatever these priorities that the individuals have raised in the survey, and they hear from their constituents. Which do they want to prioritize that they focus their community policing on? Where do they want them to direct those people? And the second part of that is the hours they want the coverage. As I said earlier, the issues raised from sun up to well after sundown, and there is no way resource can do that. Even to get coverage from, say, sunrise at roughly 7 to maybe 8, 9 o'clock, 9, 10 o'clock at night, I got to believe what we're talking 8 to 10 people just to cover that when you have court appearances and the rest of that. Well, I'm willing to make anybody a bet right now they're not going to fund 10 resources in order to be able to cover that time period. So I think what we need to do in our report is to make clear to them that there is a ratio, but they have to determine, as they're looking at what they want to pay for, the hours of coverage that they want and the issues that they want covered. And when they then negotiate that number of resources with the sheriff's department, and that is something we don't do, that's something that the town staff and Roger will do, that they take those into consideration as they give direction to Roger that we want coverage from these hours, or we want coverage on these issues. And that's where the focus should be, because the one thing that we need to make sure is that whatever they come up with, and this goes to Jesse's point from Benita, is that we set the right expectations. So that if someone thinks that they're going to get for 2 people coverage from sunrise to sunset, that's just not realistic. And people and the community and the results and the feedback the council's going to get is this is not working, because at 8 o'clock the other night I saw such and such happening. Well, that's because you paid for 2 resources and you said you wanted them there first thing in the morning. Or someone walking the beach in the morning doesn't get the coverage they want. They said, I saw a homeless person out there urinating as I was trying to do my walk with my dog. And they're saying, that's right, because we paid for coverage from these hours. So I think as we shape this report, now I'll draft something, I'll get it to all of you to look at. I'll also get it to you, Captain, and to Lieutenant, so that you can make sure that I'm not saying anything that's not accurate, so that when the council comes back in August, we're kind of shaping for them. This is what community policing is on Fort Myers Beach. Some examples of how they would deal with some of our issues raised in here. But the considerations you have to do are you need to prioritize the issues, but you need to prioritize the hours. Actually, you need to prioritize both as you determine the cost that you're willing to pay for community policing.
Do you really think we have to prioritize the issues? I mean, it's not like they haven't been here, so it's not like you're just coming in blind. They know kind of what our issues are. I think we could utilize, these are some of the things these are the issues that our people are saying have caused problems, but we don't have in here drug deals and other things that happen on the island that we know that they've busted other, homes or whatever in certain areas. I think that we can say that these are the 10 issues that our constituents wrote about that they feel but I don't think we have to prioritize and say, this is the most important, this is the most important. But I do think we have to go into the number of deputies. Say, obviously 2 is not going to cut. Well, that's me.
Okay, no, and maybe prioritizing not the word, maybe it's focus the resources. I think that, so we talked about, for example, a bike operation. That may not be appropriate if they only have 2 people and we're having them, the council's really focused on transient or the other. True. So that's what I mean.
Okay, got it.
I'll correct the wording, and you can, certainly edit the hell out of what I draft.
And she will.
That's good. And
This island has changed in the time that he's been here. So every year there may be different issues that may arise and may be different priorities. So
Issues change weekly. daily. We adjust and we do a great job with it, but
What we need to do is shape this report that we're gonna give to council in such a way that whatever agreement they come up with, if they decide to go with community policing, that it's well communicated to the community what to expect, what we're gonna get for what we pay for. That to me is the main objective, so that if you would have asked someone, you'd have asked me, most people, 4 months ago before Dan started bringing up community policing at the council level, it would have been all over what it is or what it isn't. We've been able to continue to bring that down through the discussions at the council and discussions here, discussions on the radio, and we've been able to narrow that down some. But we still need to be able to make sure that we provide a clear enough focus when they make a decision what they're paying for, that the community understands that, so that the pushback is realistic to what we paid for. So that when you're looking at, was this successful in this initial year? That was successful because we paid for this and we got all this. Versus we paid for this and they expected all this. That's really what I hope to be able to shape when I write this report. Make sense? Comments?
It's hard to quantify law enforcement. Law enforcement as a profession got itself into a corner, I thought, professionally trying to quantify the work of police officers. I think there were a lot of fears the police officers were out eating donuts and not doing their job. And so they wanted to be able to count arrests and traffic tickets and traffic stops and community contacts. And you can still do all of that, and I'm sure you guys do track that kind of information on individual officers. But what I think you learn is that's not the heart and soul of the community. But what is the heart and soul of the community is, how do people feel about safety in general? Do I feel safe? Do I feel like if I need them, they're going to be there for me? Is my experience that when I call, they're there pretty quick and they help me? And I have a sense of well-being when I'm in my home community. And as that sense of well-being rises, I think you find much more community support for the other aspects of what government would like to accomplish or needs to accomplish, because as we know, everything boils down to money. So as that level rises, I think you find people being more willing to work with government to do things. As that level declines, you find suspicion, a lot of suspicion of government, a lot of unhappiness with it, and you're not going to find cooperation. So it's nebulous, but it's real as can be. And the communities I have seen that were successful were communities where police departments interacted with people in a way that at that level of safety and security and satisfaction rose. I think that's what we're really trying to do here. We are offering core services now, and I think the public feels like, well, if I call the police, they'll come. Sometimes it takes a lot longer than I'd like, but they'll come. I think what we want to do is go somewhere beyond that. If we don't, we're not going to be able, I think, to move our community forward as effectively. And the public isn't going to be satisfied or happy, my experience.
Well, your perfect example is 4th of July. There were no incidents, but there was a huge presence. And if you lived on the north end, you saw it, and it was wonderful. And
Give you a strong
it gave you a sense
of
of safety, but you couldn't come back and go, oh, there were only 5 arrests this weekend instead of 10, or there might have been a tangible, I didn't see it, but a quantitative report, but you've got the positive feedback from people who lived up there and were around that activity that said that changed, as opposed to Memorial Day weekend.
Right. So the measure of success there was not how many arrests we made or how many contacts we made or how many field interrogation cards we completed. The measure of success there was, how did the community feel about that, that day, about that event, about that incident?
Right.
again, it's hard to put a number on that.
It's
That's why I said, yeah.
exceedingly hard.
You're eliminating from happening based on this stuff, and
Exactly correct.
A lot of what you're gonna, a lot of it, as I said before, is visual. For me, I'm a visual person. And just seeing, you may walk the beach and maybe months from now, you don't see the same person you saw sitting in the bushes or doing what that was normally there 2 or 3 times a week. It's things like that that you don't see. I want to be careful, going back to what you were saying, John, as far as trying to, I think the captain's been very clear that if given resources, they're the experts. They're the ones that reply to the calls. They're the ones that see all the things that happen. I think to try to prioritize for them what staff or what the council or what the community thinks is important may not align with what is really important. And what I mean by that is you may see an uptick of the bike thefts, but a downtick in the amount of homeless people. You may see one homeless person, but we don't see the 50 bikes that are getting stolen every day. So I don't want to get put in a position where we have to feel that, I mean, again, he's been very clear. Their job is to take the resources and allocate them as they feel, as they're needed. Now, certainly communication will let them know what we see, have data to know what they see, and somewhere in the middle, I think we can meet. But I believe the council and the town government's job is to provide the resources that they need to make as many people as possible feel more comfortable with what they see or feel or interact, or you start to see the same people, you feel more comfortable wanting to go up and talk to them. I drive off the south end of the island every single day, and I can tell you over the last 5 or 6 months, I've seen more and more sheriff deputy cars in the last 6 months than I've seen in the last 10 years or 8 years. So whatever is going on, I'm visually seeing the difference. So I don't want to say that I feel more comfortable, but I feel much more at ease knowing that I can stop one of them if I need to and ask a question or say, hey, I saw this, or probably kind of rambling on here a little bit. But my point was, I don't want to get into people thinking that we should set a prioritized list as to this is what's most important, this is what's most, because it's all important. It's not just one thing. It's a community as a whole is important. And I think that's what personally I'm striving to get is the betterment of the entire community, not just one specific issue.
I think what the captain said earlier about the specific personnel that get assigned down here, because it's a different kind of world, is very important. Interaction with the community is important because it makes people see police officers as human beings as opposed to some sort of occupation force. I've seen situations where police officers, there's lots of them, people might feel safe that I'm not going to get mugged, but then they're also got one eye on that cop, on what's he going to do. They're all standing around talking. They're not interacting with the community. They're not saying, hey, how's it going? You guys, where you guys from? You guys visiting, or you guys, that sort of interaction on the part of a police officer really puts people at ease with them and makes them glad that guy's there, as opposed to, well, I'm sort of glad he's here, but I'm a little nervous about him being here too. I mean, that this is what's going on, I think, in the mind of a lot of citizens as they interact with the guy in uniform. So the guy in uniform has a lot of control over that, and I'm sure just what Tim said, you know, it's important to get the right people here. I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will.
John, steps, you said you were going to summarize discussion, get it to me, distribute it out to the committee, back, provide it to the captain, provide that to an update to town council with a recommendation to town council since they'll be discussing this. Is that what I'm hearing?
As far as a recommendation, that's what we have to talk about, but right now it was to formulate what community policing is, whether we feel it, and then the next question would be, do we feel we need community policing?
I know that this will be discussed as part of the budget process, which the budget hearings are in September, but I know that there will be, I think, a cursory review in August, so you guys don't meet until middle to late of August.
Now, this would be targeted for August 3rd meeting.
Okay.
So first off, I heard what Don and Dan are talking about. I'll rephrase the way I talk about, understanding the priorities. The sheriff, we follow the sheriff's trends. But I think it's gonna require a great deal of communication as they do that as to, we're going in this direction, you know, people say, why aren't you dealing with such and such? You know, it's because this is where we're doing the resource. So I think that's gonna take communication and reporting on what community policing is doing, et cetera. So, and I'll phrase something to that effect, Dan and Dawn. But to Chelsea's point, what is your feeling? Now, we've talked about this, and I'll raise it this way. 70% of the population said they felt comfortable on the beach. At the same time, 69% said they want community policing. What are your thoughts on community policing in general? I'll start with Jim as to whether you're in favor of going forward, recommending that they do community policing, and if you think we should give them a number or not, and the rationale for giving them a number or not.
I would be a strong proponent of it. I think we have a lot of potential here to improve the quality of life on this beach and to reduce the number of incidents that have, you know, and have occurred in the past and will likely occur in the future. I think we need probably a minimum of 4 to start, just so that they can have enough resources to make an impact. Otherwise, I think people are going to say, I don't see an impact at all. I don't feel any different having 2 guys here, but I think with 4, we could make a difference.
Tom?
I'm a huge proponent, and I love what the captain said about this program improving quality of life. I think that's an awesome concept, and I'm absolutely 100% behind it. I don't want to quantify. I'll defer that to the experts, but I'm hugely behind it.
On?
I concur with what they both said, and I won't give a number of what I think is the number. I do think it's more than 2, but they're the experts, and
Suzanne?
I'm in complete agreement.
All for it. Up to the, decide how many.
I'm in favor of, you know, going forward with community policing. I see the education point, and I think that'd be very valuable to maximize the limited resources, whether it's 2 or 20. It's still a limited number of resources, but to me, it's that education interaction with the community that's critical to make people self-sufficient in a lot of ways, which is what I really see the big benefit of community policing being. As for a number, you know, to come up with a number, 4, 6, whatever, I'm not sure how much influence, as Tom said, we'll have and even sway in the council. If we gave them a number, they're going to do what they're going to do. I think what we need to do is make sure we outline in the report to them that you have to consider coverage, the issues, what you really want to accomplish, and they'll make that decision. So I guess I would go along with, I'm with Dawn and everybody else. 2's not enough from everything I've heard. The discussions we have with Benita, 2's not going to get it. But I think getting any number through council right now is going to be an achievement. And for us to give a number is just kind of, okay, we can give a number, but I think they're going to not pay a whole lot of attention to our recommendation. All right. Anything else? Go ahead. What's that?
Was there a motion?
No, that was our recommendation. You want
by
to vote
motion,
on?
we all voted yes.
That's what I wrote down, in favor, you know.
I didn't know if you wanted to formalize it with a motion.
You want to move that we move forward with recommending to the town council that they engage in community policing?
I will.
Second? Second. In favor?
Aye.
Okay. All in favor? Unanimous. Anything else on community policing before we let the captain sit down?
I just want, if I could just add one more thing, I just want to let everybody know, and I have to say this, and I truly mean it. The core level of service and the assets and the allocations that the sheriff provides to the beach is just certainly safe. This program is just going to help enhance those services. So I've got what I need to do. We need to do down here, and if I need more, I get them. It's like Memorial Day. The response was unbelievable. Sheriff graciously provided a lot of those assets along with the core level of service for 4th of July could have been used elsewhere, and they dedicated to the beach, where people come when they come to Lee County. They're not coming to play golf inland. They're coming to the beach. They come here for the sand and the sun and the water and the beautiful water and the resorts. So this is what's important to him. It's what's important to me. I do want people to know that they are safe here. They're safe to come here. I also want them to know that the core level of services do a phenomenal job. I stand by that. I have a great team here. Turf covers spring break every year to the tune of about $500,000. I don't know if most people know that. It's a huge operation we run every year, and we've done that for many, many years. I want people to know that they are safe here. There'll be instances that come up when maybe they feel uncomfortable or something comes on. Probably will, but call us and we'll handle it. I think that this program could be a huge benefit.
All right.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, next up, we need to run through the rest of the issues on here and prioritize when we're going to talk about them, when we can or not. So keep me honest. I've made a list, and let me know which ones I missed. But first up, I had crosswalks. It was really about visibility and location, and it was around the markings themselves, locations of where those crosswalks are, as well as the flashing lights to identify for pedestrians and for motorists. Here's the issue with bringing this up too early. First off, the has made it pretty clear they're not going to do anything with crosswalk additions, certainly until they finish the existing construction out there. Because we made that run at them once, and they didn't add or modify any of the crosswalks because the engineers have a plan, and they can't stop that plan right now and go back in. The other issue with even existing crosswalks, markings, and lighting, the warning lights, until we know what the street lighting looks like, so that the county can say this is how we're going to do our crosswalk lighting, we can't really address how you can add or not add flashing lights to that mix for the eye response and the visibility. So I'm recommending that we identify this as an issue that was raised to the council, that we'll be at some point looking into locations. We'll be looking into additional warning lights. We will be looking at additional markings, but all that was kind of dependent on the street lighting, the end of construction, and the solution for the crosswalk lighting brought up by the county itself. Do that? That's the way I'll write that up for the council. By the way, you won't just get the community policing, you'll get all this stuff, so enjoy the reading. Homeless. We've discussed at prior meetings the proposal on homeless. Homeless is definitely raised as an issue here. Talked about one idea was to get another subgroup to do this, and I got the definite impression no one wanted to do that for a lot of reasons. That it would be best if the PSC acted as the host to bring in the affected parties, and those would include things like the churches, the Lee County Sheriff, Fire, the county organizations that provide services to homeless, the town council regarding ordinances, investments, and then possibly input from the businesses and the general population. But the idea would be we would host a meeting, bring all those parties together, and they would talk about the services or how they deal with the transient population today. So Captain Layler just talked about, different things that they do with the hot teams, how they would build with, if community policing goes forward, how community policing would interact with the transient people, what they do if there is a criminal activity on behalf of or by some of these transients. We would have the same thing from the community churches that provide services to them. The idea would be to get them in one room, because I don't think that's happened, where all the parties have been in one room, talked about what they do, get that transparency going, and then facilitating a discussion to see, is there any way we can improve what the chronic issue is, and quit mixing the full homeless population and issues they have with those that are the chronic ones versus other things that the community or the town council could invest in to even help those that are truly in need, that are trying to better themselves. And I think we have the opportunity, because of our charter, to be able to bring in all those affected parties and actually serve as host for that discussion. Thoughts? Out loud thoughts.
I think that's the only way to go to be any successful, is to be inclusive. And for us to not be trying to solve the problem, but trying to facilitate that group coming together to solve the problem. I like the idea of us hosting that kind of interaction and meeting, and at some point in the future.
Other thoughts? All right, then I will write that up, edit it, add who else we believe, what other group should be there. And I'd also really like to have, when you respond to it, your thoughts on bringing in the general public or businesses. We have general public as members of the committee, and we also have businesses as members of the committee between, and so, you know, they kind of represent their population or their group. Next was e-bikes was brought up. We raised a specific question. Community policing, we did hear from the captain how they could, you know, partly address some of that. I think that we also have an educational component here. I don't believe people think they just look at it as e-bikes, but now we see skateboards, electronic skateboard, motorized skateboards flying down there, and we see those the other things where you put your foot on, and I can't even think of it, you pedal along. At any rate, there are more types of motorized devices than just e-bikes. I think that part of this would be educating them on that. Scooters was the word I was looking for, electronic scooters. So I think education as to what that ordinance really says, and make it clear that you can ride an e-bike on the sidewalk if you are under pedal power. That's what the ordinance calls for. And if you have a device that's ADA compliance. And I don't think people understand that. I think there's some confusion around that. The other thing that came up regarding e-bikes and electronic devices was the speed limit versus the device itself. And do we want to explore that? Whether we state, you know, even if we look at some of the markings on the sidewalk, the last one we looked at said 5 miles per hour, because that's the average walking speed or whatever. Do we want to, as a committee, explore switching from the type of device to a speed versus a type of device instead of trying to keep up with all the electronic devices? Was raised and the initial ordinance was addressed, but it was actually mocked as opposed to effectively discussed, whether speed and using speed as the qualifier versus the type of device. So e-bikes at this point, what's your thoughts on, do we want to just make a recommendation that, you know, community policing will address part of it, that we do think they need to have better education, or should there be a review of the ordinance as to device versus speed limit, which is actually what the device is intended to address? Again, I'm open up for
Got a question. Do we have is there a lot of e-bike accidents on the island? Involved with cars?
I know that there are a lot of e-bikes being used. As far as accidents, I couldn't give you the number. I don't think we have a problem per se, no.
I live on Estero Boulevard, and they fly by like 30 miles an hour, 25, 30 miles an hour in the bike lane. So
I guess I don't see an issue with that, because the speed limit's 25 miles an hour down the island, so they should be able to ride 25 miles an hour in the bike lane. I think that's fine.
Shouldn't they be out in the traffic?
Oh, no, we don't have that marked. There's not a law to say that an e-bike has to be in traffic or in a bike lane. And you can see a bike rider, you know, zipping down that fast,
You look
too.
in your rear view mirror, the bike back there, you don't know it's an e-bike. It's on you like that.
Well, I think that goes to I was going to say, I think it goes back to education then, whereas on the markings it says, you know, electronic bikes with the arrow, or, you know, on the north end, it's really clear which way you're supposed to be biking. Maybe it says no e-bikes on the cement. That's actually painted on the cement, or no electronic vehicles or bikes on the cement or on the sidewalk. And I guess I don't see how you can Because I don't think we can do a speed thing. I think that's too hard. I think you're gonna have people that are going super fast on a bike, and there's times when I've been, like a bicycle, it's like someone who's exercising in the morning, if I'm stopped, they will go right by you. I mean, ride a bike.
There is actually an ordinance on the book that talks about a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit on town roads.
Bikes. So then that's where I would say to go in the markings, in the bike lane, 15 miles an hour. You wanna go faster, you go into the road.
That's town roads, not counting Estero, which is.
You don't control.
Right.
Yeah, I know, that's my whole
Right.
thing is a stereo, so. You know, that's what my thing is, I think it needs to be markings on the road and education. I can't see anybody clocking a bike.
Ordinance doesn't require bicycles to use the bike lane when a bike lane is provided, does it? So a person on a bicycle could choose to ride in the roadway or choose to ride in the bike lane.
Yes, and if you read in the responses, individual responses that Randy, and Don came up with, most people talk about not riding the bike lane. They ride on the sidewalk because they feel safer on the sidewalk than they do with existing traffic on the Estero Boulevard.
I think if that's the case, that somewhere in our ordinances, we should be limiting the speed on the sidewalk. And whether it's a pedaled bike can go very fast. If someone pedaling down the sidewalk at a very high rate of speed, it could be disastrous. Right? So people just need to be, I would call it common sense. I'm going to be up on the sidewalk, I'm going to kind of go slow. But, make signs for people that don't have common sense.
Others feel that way? Because the way I would write this up is bring it to the council and say, we had a discussion about speed on sidewalks. We'll talk about education, improving that, but we'll ask the council if they would like us to relook at that ordinance as regards to adding a speed limit on the sidewalk as well as or in reference to devices, and that the council will give us direction. All right. Bike lane sidewalk markings. I'm just going to tell them we went over this already. It came up in there, the bike lane markings. Dan will get us an update for the next meeting, or at the council meeting, he'll be able to give an update. Street lighting. Chelsea reached out a few weeks ago about, the consultant asked if they could meet with the Public Safety Committee and go over the recommendations. I asked Chelsea to check with Murph to see if they're willing to do a joint meeting so we don't have conflicting recommendations going to the council. So next week on the 28th, that meeting will be held. At that meeting, you all saw what I think Randy sent out, that the consultant is going to give us 4 recommendations, I believe it was, or options that they were going to take us through that we will comment on at that joint meeting. Hopefully we can come up with some areas that we're fully in agreement with on Murph as to lighting. And if there are exceptions, those exceptions will be identified, and that will be what gets reported out to the council at the August 3rd meeting. What's next? You're right. Tuesday at
26th.
Today, 26th?
Monday the 26th at 9 a.m.
Okay. Monday the 26th, 9 a.m. right here.
That's what I have on my calendar.
Neighborhood watch was another issue that was on there. 53% of the respondents are interested in neighborhood watch on the island.
Can we back up real quick? So the consultant will actually be here in person. We're gonna set this up kind of like a work session. There will be so many of you.
Can't make it, can we call in, or is it just you're absent? 'Cause
We can try call, we can do that.
I need
As long
to see
as-
him, I just need to hear.
As long as the committee, I mean, you can always listen on YouTube, but as long as the committee allows that, that's fine. That's always. I know that one of the Murph members requested notes or like a whiteboard, so it can really be a work session. So the consultant will be prepared for that. Hopefully, I will be able to get backup material to read prior to that meeting. An email comes from the consultant, but Not sure what it is yet, but as soon as I have any information, I will pass it along to you all with regards to the recommendation and that.
You're anticipating that meeting occurring in this room?
Yes, sir.
No, good. So Neighborhood Watch, 53% of the respondents indicated they were interested in a watch. So it's not necessarily island-wide, but it's pockets in the island. So, Randy, is it possible to identify the location of those that specifically asked for, that 53%? Just
Yeah, so what I did was filter, Randy, so what I did was filter the respondents with the street address. That's kind of just, what we need to do now is like quantify which, where the respondents came from. So how many of them were from Bay Beach Lane or how many of them were coming from Estero. So, yes.
if we can go in and identify those communities that were looking for those, that would be an area that we would start to do our outreach to. Those that actually have asked for community watch, our neighborhood watch programs, we could target. If we do get community policing, we can give that information to community policing. If not, we can bring it up back here at this council and talk about how to help them establish one with existing resources from the sheriff. Dawn, I believe you said you have a community watch in your neighborhood, and how we should put that together. So neighborhood watch, we'll wait till we get a next meeting. We'll work with Randy to kind of identify the neighborhoods that are looking for it, and we'll discuss it then. The other thing that I had on here was, in my notes, was traffic congestion. That was discussed. Other people were talking, and we hear it all the time, that the issue is people walking where they want. Well, they do, and there's not much we can do about that. I do think one thing that has been brought up before, and it kind of, I'm not sure why it died, but it did, was a parking application for people, an automated mobile parking application. We've all sat in traffic up there, and we've all watched people with their brake lights come on, and they slow down, they look, and then they speed up to the next corner, and they slow down, they look. Well, nothing creates traffic congestion more than the stopping and starting of traffic like that. And a parking application where someone, before they get here, actually knows exactly where they're going would help eliminate some of that. So I'd like to raise that again with the council, that they look into either a turnkey application or the town staff or someone to put that in. I believe that that would be a help in the north end, certainly around Times Square area. Thoughts?
Why did that die, Chelsea? We worked on that before, right?
It's a lot of money.
What was that? Was it money?
You have to put sensors in. And one of the other, because we thought about this in the past when I used to oversee the parking street enforcement department, was one of the caveats, one of the issues was the parking app right now that's implemented when somebody pays for their parking spot, we can see which spots are filled. But the downfall to it is the residential and business parking permits, because you pay one time for a fee and you park for a year. It's not registered through the app. So it's half implemented right now, half not. But the parking attendants are the ones who see what spots are filled and whatnot, not the public. So
How about this, Chelsea? How about you kind of summarize the issues around parking applications, and we can discuss it at a future meeting?
Randy and I will compile that, working with Doug, our parking staff, and kind of give the pros and cons of that. But we have contemplated that in the past. But one of the big issues was, Tom, cost of infrastructure and putting sensors and making a secure system and things like that. But I've been to a parking garage and I've seen it happen. So
It's used all over the world, but certainly all over the states as well, and there must have been some justification for them doing that. Whether it was having people go and empty out parking meters, or just getting the cash flow, or
Fort
just
Lauderdale has
improving.
it at their airport. So
I just always thought it'd be cool, like, people are driving here and they get to the bridge and you can't get on the bridge, it's long. We have that parking way on Pine Ridge Road. Why wouldn't they have signs everywhere? The island is full. Park at Pine Ridge Road. But then you have to have the little tram that has the scoop loop super fast. It can't stop in traffic. It's gotta go.
Which, all right,
That's all I'm saying.
so
New lane.
in the survey, what are the major issues or issues, period, that I haven't addressed to talk to the council about that you can think of? I tried to roll some of them up, a lot of them overlapped. If there are any, if you see them right now, great. If not, add them to the report, the summary that comes out within a few days from Chelsea.
A little thought I had, John, was in our meeting on the 22nd, whatever, perhaps we ought to invite somebody from the library board. The library is a location that obviously has had a history, but also I see homeless folks on their property all the time. Sure, they would like to contribute to the meeting.
All right, then that moves us to public comment. There's no other public here.
I have a couple items before you jump to the setting next. I just want to make note that Tom, Mike, and Jim are up for renewal in October of 2021, so in a couple months. So if you are interested in renewing, please fill out that application through the clerk's office. Remain on this public safety committee.
Were they?
Tom, Mike, and Jim.
Get the application from
The clerk's office, yeah. And then, just as a point of reference, this is the Public Safety Committee. I'm letting you all know that the signal project that's happening at Old San Carlos and Estero will be under construction starting sometime in August. So, that is a federally funded project of rules and regulations that we have to jump through. The point of public safety that will be under construction.
How long do they estimate that project will take?
To substantial completion, about 6 weeks. You are impacted down there, Susan. But there will be some media posts going out. Our pre-construction meeting here in weeks. We'll start to push some information. The other project that this committee was somewhat involved with was the downtown sidewalks project. The contractor is Mitchell and Stark. They are mobilized. Hopefully that will be done by the end of the year. Yeah, we are working through some issues with some residents and some driveway concerns and things like that. Arrow Bay Hotel Company, working with them on the easement that they're required, part of their, whatever acronym it was, with their redevelopment to put sidewalks on their property. So that project is moving forward.
Councilman, do you have anything you want to say as we go around?
I just wanted to add to what Captain Layler said earlier about the 4th of July. Everybody, there was a lot of very, very positive comments. As he mentioned, the Lee County Sheriff's Office made a significant investment in upping the services there as well as the town. The town made quite a financial investment in adding some extra officers there. So thank you for your service, and thank you to everyone in the town hall that made that happen.
Mike, you got any member item you want to bring up?
No.
Suzanne?
No.
Don?
Nope.
Tom?
I've said enough.
Jim? A motion to it. The next meeting then is next week with the lighting consultant, and the next regular meeting, I believe, will be August 17th. It's the third Tuesday.
And I will be working with you all through August, September. I'm trying to transition Andy as your staff liaison and some additional responsibilities and experience working with you all. I will be working through the lighting and all of these items that we've been working on, up to date on that and transition. Hopefully by the new fiscal, he'll be your staff liaison.
And do I need to get approval from this to call in for the 26th?
We'll
talk about that afterwards?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah, because at the meeting, they'll just say, do you give permission for Don to talk? And say yes. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
I'm also gone in August.
Okay.
I'm gonna be out of country. And I'm back.
Yep, it's all you.
Here, you can